I'm really interested in talking to all sorts of people in Shadowrun, but one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you in particular is because for, admittedly kind of selfish reasons, I've got this thing going on, this big actual play project that I'm trying to do, and part of that is doing some world building, and I find myself doing a lot of writing, because I find that when I am even just trying to GM Shadowrun, for example, I find that it's really easy for me to better grasp of what it is that I'm creating and have it cement firmly into my mind if I write short stories about it, okay? Because it's like, it kind of puts a narrative view on things and whatnot. So that's a long way of me saying that I've been doing a lot of little story writing for this actual play that's coming up, mostly just to flesh out the world. And I find that I am incredibly, even when I'm just doing it for myself, intimidated by the entire process of writing, okay? And so I wanted to ask you, like, how we're gonna talk about this a little bit, because I want to become. I'm gonna teach myself by talking to you. I'm gonna become an amazing writer. Okay.
Sure, yeah.
So walk me through what, for Russell Zimmerman, how does the writing process work for you? Coming up with ideas, going on, putting them into print. How does it work?
Well, a lot of the times it's going to vary on what I'm writing for. It's a very different process to try and write a novel than to try to write 3,000 words of intro fiction. And you've also got a whole different timetable, different expectations, a different editing process. But even when I do novels, I often kind of do them wrong. And that a lot of my novels will start as a scene, a kind of a piece of short fiction in my head where honestly, I worked up the entire character of Jimmy Kincaid backwards, from the kind of climactic argument at the end of Neat, that first novella.
Right.
That was the first scene to pop into my head, was this old school noir PI facing off with a high-ranked mob boss that totally outclasses him and verbally holding his own. And then from there, it all came backwards to, okay, what's he got over this guy's head? What's he trying to get from this guy and offering this guy to get it? And, I did it wrong. I started
okay.
with a snapshot. And that's how almost all my fiction works. In the same way, with this third book in the trilogy, I had an idea for a fight scene. And then it was like, okay, why did that happen? And how can I make it fit in a story? And so there's no right or wrong way to start. Sometimes you start in the beginning, sometimes you start in the middle, sometimes you start in the end. Just the number one advice I would give to somebody is whatever works for you and for that story, because it's not going to be the same every time. It's not going to be the same from project to project, much less person to person.
Sure. I guess you have, some situations where someone like you might have a specific scene in mind, a specific character, and there's this thing that they've imagined, and they're like, that would be a cool story. Let me explore that. But then, I guess there's also, you've got someone who's just imagining this entire world, and they want to tell stories within that world, a bunch of different stories.
Yeah, and that, like you said, that's kind of the GM outlook, and that's exactly why you're doing it. And even when I GM, and this is why I'm kind of a terrible GM, I always have the player outlook. I've got a buddy that loves the big macro scale setting design, world building, history of nations stuff. And then I'm always like, well, but what about that guy? Like what did that mean to that one guy that's living in this one city on this one border 500 years after that epic war, and I always comment things from that opposite direction. Just a different mindset there. But my inspiration can be just any stupid old thing. I'll watch a movie trailer and like one snippet of that trailer and make up a different story that clip could have been, right? Like just, one car chase in a Bourne movie. Just any little thing can sometimes kind of trigger the idea. A song, listening to the lyrics of a song can make me think of a character that might have the blues,
Yeah,
and then
sure,
I'll
yeah.
come up with this whole terrible setting and world and gangs and corporations that are why that guy has the sads.
Right, right,
So
right.
it's just whatever catches my eye at any given moment can turn into a story.
How do you keep track of all these inspirations? Do you have like, do you carry around a notepad or?
No, I should. I don't. I just kind of I don't turn it off. I'm just kind of always thinking about it. I've always got character ideas percolating for a half dozen different game settings. I'll listen to a piece of music that reminds me of playing Vampire the Masquerade in like 1997. And I'm
Right.
like, I remember that song. And then I'll spend the rest of my drive thinking up a new Brujah character. Right? Like
Right.
it's just, my wife and I have often joked that I've got like undiagnosed ADD, but I've
Right.
just like wrestled it into submission and I kind of write it around now instead of the other way around. When I'm sitting down to actually type, literally all I'm doing is typing the story that's been done upstairs for a month or two. I just get some weird idea and then I just kind of mull it over in my brain along with three or four other ideas that are in this tumbler for a while. And then when the time comes to sit down and hammer a keyboard, I type about 140 words a minute. So the story comes out and is basically
Yeah,
done.
I wish I could do that. I have like I do the same sort. I sit around and I get these ideas that pop into my head and everything, but I'm really really scatterbrained and incredibly distractible. So I'll have this idea and I'll be like, oh, this is a great idea, and then it spawns another idea, and then I see some shiny object over here, and then I forget it all.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I am. It's just that every different idea I get is just a different story. So I've always kind of got three or four percolating, at any given moment. It's what works for me. But I have like I said, my assumption is that I'm doing it wrong because I've never been formally trained in writing. My degree's in history.
Right.
My minor was in literature, but not composition. I've never taken a single class on how to write. It all just came from reading a lot
Sure.
and then playing on online games. And then playing on online games turned into writing short fiction between the adventures. And then that turned into writing fan fiction that I posted on forums. And then that turned into the job.
Yeah, I've heard said before, and maybe you can tell me what your thoughts are on this. I've heard it said, and other people I've asked about writing, that they say that like half the battle is just like spewing something out. Getting your idea,
Yeah.
your barely formed ideas onto paper, and just doing it.
I kind of disagree with the onto paper part because
Sure.
for me, so much of my process is purely mental instead.
Okay.
But that's my first drafts are in my head is all. It's the same idea though, is just run with that story. If you get an idea for a certain character or you want to design the backstory of why this shanty town exists and what crime boss runs it, just whatever
Right.
little thing you've got, run with it, man. Just see where it goes, try to backtrack it, try to take it forward and say,
Sure.
what does this character add to the setting? Whether it's the setting of your game or the setting of a published setting that you're wanting to add stuff that characters can interact with. Because and part of the gig with RPG work is everything you do, you want to make it a hook. You want to either make it a hook for players to interact with or inspiration for players to do their own thing with, right?
Sure.
But yeah, so just whatever your stupid idea is, hammer on it until it's not stupid.
You heard it here first, guys. Russell Zimmerman thinks my idea is stupid.
Yeah, professionally stupid.